Hello, good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this month's Unlock Impact panel on sustainable fashion. A wonderful welcome to Tanushree, Hitesh, and Sam, who are joining us today. All entrepreneurs in their own right. Hitesh and Sam currently working on fashion startups, and Tanushree is working on an exciting platform around circular fashion. We'll be talking to them more around this hot topic. But just to dive in to the topic itself, before we get to the introductions of our wonderful panelists, the fashion industry, of course, is considered to be one of the top polluters. It accounts for 10% of global carbon emissions and 20% of global wastewater. And the textile industry, 85% of textiles are really disposed of rather than recycled. So this is really a big issue that is facing the world that we are in, which is in a climate crisis. So this is an industry that really is changing as we speak, but are they changing fast enough? What are some of the trends that we are seeing in this industry? We know that the need of the hour is really for the industry to reorient itself, to move towards a more circular fashion economy. But we also recognize that consumers need to change, need to ask tougher questions, need to change their buying choices and take action. We know that globally the sustainability movement has really caught on, and people are moving more towards a sustainable lifestyle. But how can our fashion choices follow suit? That's really the topic of discussion today with our wonderful panel of experts. I'm going to jump to each of you, but I'll just say a quick introduction. Hitesh, he's the founder of Desi Hangover. He's based in India, and he started this right out of college. So we'd love to hear more about how that came about. Sam is based in Manila, in the Philippines. She grew up around sewing machines, and with a grandmother who is a seamstress, and then she really got into this really young, and she decided to set up Candid Clothing, and we'll hear more about that. Tanushree is also an entrepreneur. She set up a social enterprise that focuses on design solutions for textile waste. But right now she's doing something exciting with a platform called Circular Apparel Innovation Factory, an initiative by Intellicam, which is a consulting practice based out of India. And it's an industry body that really is trying to promote circularity in textile and fashion. So we'll hear more about that from Tanushree. Hitesh, I'm going to jump straight to you. For a quick introduction, we'd love to understand a little bit more about what drove you. You started this out of college. What happened?
Yes,
How did you get here?
sure. Let me brief you on the story. So everybody knows the awesome kulhapuris that people wear. This is one of the traditional craft that India as a country has. While I was in college, I just happened to visit these ecosystems, and I fell in love with the entire art form. And at the same time, I was reading a lot about the global fashion industry. And I could see that stark difference that on one side, these artisans with such a great heritage, such nice craft, and there's a sizable population, almost 20,000 plus families still involved in it, are literally having the worst times in their history of the art. And on the other side, the fashion industry, like something like a Tommy Hilfiger, starts from India. Like the first batch of sampling that he did was from Juhu, Mumbai, and he's written there that Indians have the best handicraft probably in the world. And so I could see that two industries, one is grown so big, and the other, the original artisans are struggling. And that is a time when I realized that there's so much to be done in these ecosystems. That primarily what they lack is not the skill, they lack that ecosystem around them, which did not develop as the fashion industry developed. So that was the small thought that I carried. And it was more like a college activity that I felt that, it is my responsibility as a citizen that I should do something for these artisans. So I kind of gave them very naive level solutions that, they need to change their supply chain. They need to look into their raw material. There were basic things that they were doing wrong. And that is how I started that that small initiative to help them, which grew to today what is Desi Hangover. So currently we support almost 70 plus artisans. Today, those same artisans are making products of global quality through that very ecosystem. So we've kind of built that ecosystem for them. And there are a lot of other things that we do, which I will probably tell in the course of the panel here.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. That's exciting to hear because you speak about the ecosystem that's really needed to enable these artisans to flourish. And I'm sure we'll chat more about that. Sam, let me jump to you. Another part of the world, a little bit more towards the
Okay.
east in the Philippines. Your story is a little bit different. You started even younger than Hitesh. You were exposed to workers who are working in the textile industry. And so, how did you get started? Tell us your journey to candid clothing.
Okay, so I actually grew up with a grandmother who is a seamstress, and so our family struggled a bit, like as my parents were growing up, like financially, because it was even back then it was already so difficult for garment workers to support their families through their trade, and especially now with the rise of fast fashion, it's become common practice for sewers to receive um, was 5 pesos per piece, and so peso like 50 pesos is to like $1, just so you guys get an idea of that. And it's so low. And a lot of the manufacturing used to be done here in the Philippines, but because of people wanting to get lower prices, it was pulled out and outsourced into cheaper countries like Vietnam and the like. So right now, the people manufacturing in the Philippines just make um, the garments that are sold in I don't know what the word is in English, but it's called changge here. So it's like really low quality stuff that they just have to churn out a lot. And so they don't know how to make quality pieces anymore. A lot of them don't know how. And that's what we're really trying to do, to integrate like ethical fashion by also upgrading the skills of the current workers here in the Philippines. So yeah, we can talk about it later.
All right, more about candid clothing, I'm sure will come up later. We'll jump over to Tanushree. Tanushree, you're also an entrepreneur who started out with a social enterprise, but you're working on an interesting platform. Tell us a little bit of your journey into what you're doing today.
Okay, so unlike these two, I didn't start very young at all. I had absolutely nothing to do with fashion, textile, product, nothing. I was working as a digital product manager and working in publishing and just like doing my own thing. I was in London for a few years, and somewhere in between I came down to India, where my mom just loved textiles, and like most Indian moms was like a bit of a hoarder, and so she had this cupboard where she was hoarding all these little bits and bobs of fabric that had been left over from stitching her clothes and all of that. And she had kind of found herself, she set up a little boutique, and then she was running this little garment manufacturing unit, like a very small one, but even at that scale the issues were so immediately apparent. All the pressure was on the tailor at the bottommost rung of the ladder, the way that industry was functioning. I would just go there and hang out with her. And was observing all of this, and then was seeing these, especially what struck me visually was these giant bales of chindi waste, of scrap waste that was being thrown, and this every day. And this unit was right next to the Deonar landfill, which I think is Asia's biggest landfill. So I was seeing these giant plastic bags just being tossed, and at the time I had no idea about fast fashion or how wasteful the industry is. I just saw this waste in front of me, and then just kind of started engaging with this local community of women who all turned out to be experts at knitting and crocheting. And so I just kind of put those two things together, and that's how Chindi started. But of course, then I started learning more, and as the products went out in the market, I saw people's responses to it, started reading up more, and realized, okay, this is something that I need to do. And so over time, my sort of interest in the whole tech digital thing was anyway kind of dying its death. I think as I was getting a little older, I felt like, I don't know if I see myself in this industry in the long term. And then Chindi went from like a side hobby to what I was doing full time at some point. So Chindi is very much still alive. Chindi was, there was the retail side of it, which was essentially my way of showcasing how waste can be, its value can be enhanced instead of just being used as, downcycled, which is what a lot of waste in India is right now. So that part still exists. But then what I ended up doing a lot of at Chindi, just because people started calling me to talk about what can I do with my waste. And it was so funny because it was like a tiny boutique or like the largest fashion brand would look for what to do with textile waste and find me, and they didn't know they were talking to like some chick sitting in her living room, you know. And so I found myself doing a little bit of this consultancy type work. And then that became more interesting for me because I could see my challenges as an entrepreneur and I could see the issues in the industry. And I realized I just need a larger platform if I want to work at an industry level. You know, things need to change at that ecosystem level, to use that word. And so I got in touch with CIF. They got in touch with me when they started about a year and a half ago because they were just researching enterprises. So Chindi popped up on their radar. So I've just kind of been on the enterprise side of it, associated with them. And then this year I felt like, hey, you know, if you want me full time, I think this is what I want to do because I thought they were doing some amazing work. So I'm actually only 2 months old in CIF. So excuse me if I don't know everything about it still. Yeah, that's how I'm here.
No problem. You know, I think we'll talk some more about some of the trends that we're seeing, and I'm sure you're well placed to answer, you know, some of the questions around that. Before we kind of, you know, go to kind of what's happening globally or regionally for each of you and what you're seeing in the market, I'd like to talk a little bit about, you know, the business models, and maybe Hitesh, I can start with you. I think there might be a perspective that, you know, sustainable fashion or, you know, ethical fashion, circular economy is a fair niche, and, you know, with a small buyer base. Is that true? What are you seeing from your customers? How have you, you know, are you trying to be mainstream? Are you trying to be a niche? What is your approach in your business model, Hitesh? Sorry, I think you're still on mute, so we can't hear you, please. No worries.
Yeah, that's technology for you. So since day one, since our brand is more mission driven, that we are wanting to create more livelihoods for the communities, more quality sustainable livelihoods. Since day one, we've been very focused that our business model has to have the center as the artisan. So if you remove the artisan, we do not have a business model. So that's where we are very different in the way we see this. Though it's a niche category, but we want to make it mainstream so that we could cover those 20,000 plus families that are there. So it's a value proposition that we have kind of developed over the period of time. To talk more about the business model, we on the front end side, we position ourselves as a conscious fashion brand. And from the consumer's perspective, that today every consumer wants to know what is the footprint that he's leaving when any activity that he's doing. So when he's purchasing from us, we're making sure that the artisan is the hero. That, you know, he's communicated how the artisan was impacted, how is the ecosystem changing because of his purchase, and that's where we are kind of building that story also, which is what a lot of consumers now seek as well. So today, if like two consumers are sitting, one is wearing a pair of desis, as the customers call them, he would definitely talk about a product because it has character to it. It has an identity of its own, and people see these products more like a piece of art and not like some just material which they are going to wear for the next 6 months and throw it. So that's a very different approach that we've been seeing from the consumers end. Where doing good is kind of a mandatory now, and they want that to be not just like a marketing gimmick, but it should be there in the business model.
Sure. I think that's really interesting. And Sam, you know, I think that's something that I'd like to touch upon. You know, Manila, as we know, is a city of malls. You know, fast fashion is a big part of our lives here. You know, that sort of consumerism and, you know, that buy and dispose is definitely a big part of it. So where does candid clothing fit in when in this type of a market, which is highly consumerist? We love going to the mall. We love shopping at high street brands. So where do you find your customers? How have you positioned yourself in this market?
Okay, so similar to what Hitesh mentioned, the generations now, especially the younger ones, are moving towards more conscious consumerism. And since by 2020, majority of the workforce in the Philippines would be Gen Y and Z, we're positioning ourselves as a conscious brand, but really the way we're doing is by making it accessible to a larger market. So conscious brands right now in the Philippines are more targeted towards the luxury market, which is like 1% of the population. So it's given sustainable fashion like this stigma of, oh, this is only for expensive. It's only something that rich people can afford. But how sustainable is it really if only 1% of the population can afford it, right? So what we're doing is we're offsetting the higher cost of ethical labor by sourcing our materials from discarded fabrics from Taiwan and Korea. So actually my hometown is where they just drop everything off. Every day there are like container vans of discarded rolls of fabric from these countries, and they're just selling it here to recover the cost of making it. But it was rejected for really minor reasons, like a small hole, slightly discolored, there's a stain, and the whole roll gets rejected because of that. So it's really usable. That's what we do. That's what we use to make our small batch collections, and we're able to price it at a price point that's similar to other fast fashion brands like H&M, Uniqlo. So around less than 1,000 pesos or 20 US dollars. So there, really the goal is to make ethical fashion an easy decision for the consumer.
That's great to hear. I think you're absolutely right about the perception of uh, it being for a specific segment. Can really everybody afford ethical garments? And that's a question I think we often hear when we talk about sustainable fashion or circular economy. Tanushree, that's maybe a question for you around what you're seeing in the market. Are there more entrepreneurs like Hitesh and Sam who are trying to maybe democratize you know uh, sustainable fashion in a way where it is affordable for an everyday person, not just luxury brands? Or are we seeing more of a skewed of a higher income segment that maybe is more exposed, maybe is more more of a reliable customer in the sense that they will actually make this purchase? What are some of the trends that you're seeing from the entrepreneurs that you're working with?
So I think from my own perspective as an entrepreneur, as well as now from the CIF perspective, that challenge of sustainable being luxury, or at least affordable luxury, and not being able to fall below that price point, I mean, that challenge is very much there. I personally, I don't know if sustainable brands should be trying to compete at an H&M price point level. Like Sam, the model that you've come up with is amazing. And the fact that you've been able to price it like that, that's fantastic. But it almost seems like the natural cost of a garment, of any garment, sustainable or not, should not be as low as it is right now. Like, the customer sort of mindset has been completely changed. And it's like a huge cultural shift that I feel we need to make, in that the cost of any garment that has been made by hand, that has been grown by somebody, that has been spun into fiber, should not be like $10. That's too low for all of the people involved. So just personally, like, that's something I strongly believe in, that kind of needs to change. And clothes have been commodified, and we need to go back to looking at clothes as special once in a while things, and not these like daily commodities like toilet paper. Like that's how we're treating clothes right now. But yeah, that challenge is always there, of course, until that entire shift happens. From what is happening at CIF, which is interesting, and this is like the main thing that we're trying to do, is we're very much focused on the innovators. So we're constantly looking for innovation, small enterprises who have interesting solutions. And in order to help them scale, we're primarily looking at facilitating collaborations with larger brands and larger manufacturing or textile houses. So someone like an Aditya Birla, for instance, ABFRL is now an anchor partner of CIF, which means that if they have certain sustainability issues, like if they want to do something with their packaging waste, or they want to figure out what to do with their textile waste, we are in the process of creating an entire pipeline of innovators and small enterprises who we will engage with to put them in touch, and then broker some kind of collaboration there. Because this is where like all the small enterprise spaces, where all the cool, interesting, fun solutions are coming from. And these are the guys who can really scale it, So this is the connection that we're really trying to make to enable that process.
Yeah, that's interesting. A quick question to you guys. So what are some, where do you buy your clothing? How do you make that choice? Because, you are champions for it. Um, a fun question, let's say. Hitesh, maybe starting with you. How is it just talking about accessibility, going from what Tanushree was saying. So where would you purchase, and is it easy for you? I really don't know about men's clothing, so it'd be very interesting to know.
It's very easy for us, in fact. I don't buy shoes from any other brand for obvious reasons. For non-shoes, for example, clothes, I mostly go to likes of Fab India, wherein I know that there's a story behind the product, especially to brands like these, or even when you have these local markets. I know that the amount of effort that lady or that person must have put behind the products. That is something I personally value, and so that as a kind of, I don't stick to much of a brand, but I really kind of stick to what the story behind the product is. So on a brand side, I would go to somebody like a Fab India to buy my products.
Okay. Sam, Fab India is one of the largest retailers in India, who really have been trying to promote artisans, and trying to source, and bring all of these culture and art to the forefront through fashionable choices. But Sam, how about you? Is it candid clothing that is your first choice, or are you even finding enough other brands in the market?
Okay, so right now, like I mentioned, there's not a lot of options in the market that people or like a regular person can afford. So I buy most of my stuff from my warehouse, and I get thrifted. Like if I don't have that, whatever, like I need pants. I don't have pants right now with Candid. I just go to like a rummage sale or like a local thrift store and look for my size there. There's always going to be something, right?
That's a great
And
point.
yeah.
If you look, you'll find. Is that the case, Tanushree? Is that what you're saying? If you really look hard, you'll find what you want.
Yeah, I mean, there was a time when I got really conscious about the stuff and was making such a huge effort and spending so much time on finding the little brands and researching them. It's very hard to have that kind of time now in life. So I have to say it's Fab India head to toe almost every day, because I think that's the closest I can get to it, and accessibility and convenience. But yeah, every once in a while I will try. I shop drastically less, like much lesser than what I used to. And I think more than where I shop from, that's a change I've tried to make. Like if I have something, I want to wear it.
That's interesting because I think that kind of just takes us into another line of thought, is that it's the customers that need to change their behavior as well, right? Hitesh, I think you spoke about some of your customers who love to talk about what they're wearing, and they will talk about it, right, if they're in a group. So who are these customers? Who are these people who are making these active, conscious choices?
I think the Desi Hangover is blessed with one of the most ideal customers that we have. For example, the average age of a customer is between 28 to 40. That's the sweet spot that we have. And that's where everybody wants to have that as their TG. They're very socially conscious, they're very socially active, they're quite opinionated, they're well educated, well traveled. These are few of the traits that are of our customers. But apart from that, as I said, story really matters to them. We've also made sure that that we are kind of giving that to the customer. Now we have put RFID tags in our shoes, so every time somebody gets the phone near the shoe, he really the page will open up and he can see who made the shoes, who was the artisan, actual face of the artisan who made the shoe, and what has his story been for us all this while. And if he scans the same shoe after maybe 3 months, he'll see how has his life improved from 3 months from now. So we're doing all these
Wow.
conscious activities for the consumer to really connect to the source of their products. So that is really the model that also I was talking about earlier. The artisan is the core of everything that we do.
Great. That's a great approach. Sam, I think for Tanushree and Hitesh, it is a very consumerist market that we have here. Shopping is a big part of, especially life in big cities like Manila, malls. We love malls. We have a lot of them. So Sam, question for you, how do you seek out that customer? They are few and far between, I would imagine.
Okay, first of all, that is so cool. The whole RFID thing, I am like, wow, kind of like, goals. But okay, so for our customers, yeah, it's really difficult, but also not super. I mean, the behavior right now in Manila is more consumerism, like really. But what we're trying to do is kind of like we're acting like I like to call Candid Clothing a gateway sustainable brand. Like, so for people not yet super ready to make the switch to like, I mean, like full on lifestyle change, at least you could make a little bit of a change. So for example, this shirt is made out of it's dead stock bamboo cotton that we find here in Rizal, and it looks like a regular shirt, so people can wear it outside regularly, and it appeals to the market that's not super. Oh, I want to look sustainable. There's a look for that. So it gets them to make that decision, and once they start learning about all of the different issues surrounding the industry, then maybe they'll be more open to buying like indigenous fabrics, or like other items that are not as mainstream looking, but not necessarily from me, but like from other people. And we're also manufacturing for other brands that want to start their own sustainable line, but not that it doesn't have to look like what we're creating. It can be their own designs, because we realize that there are different styles for people, that it's not all gonna be basic, it's not all gonna be like girly. People are gonna want to look like they're gonna want to dress streetwear, or you're gonna have kids wear, and we can't make all of that. But there are people who want to cater to this market. So in order to educate the market further, we're opening up our doors to manufacturing for these people who want to further educate. So the more resources that go into educating the market, really, I think the better for everyone.
Tanushree, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, you know, is there investment capital for startups working in, circular fashion or sustainable fashion? I'm sure as Intellicap, as AIF, you are hearing about, there's a lot of interest from investors around circular economy. Is fashion a part of what they're looking at? What are you seeing from an investment perspective?
I mean, it says a lot that the Avishkar group, of which Intellicap is a part, has been doing impact investment in gender and agriculture and poverty and all of those areas for like 18 years now. And when it came to picking the 11th area out of the 10 core that they were working on, they chose circular economy. And the first sort of project under circular economy was apparel. And so I think that says a lot. And that is a huge shift from where things were when I started Chinli 5 or 6 years ago, when there was no conversation around this. There was definitely no institutional understanding of it. And now what's amazing, what we're seeing here is that, so with CIF, there's kind of a little bit of a glass wall between us and Intellicap. So it's almost like we function like a little, startup within the larger ecosystem of the company. And so at the moment, there isn't a very concerted effort from our side to kind of put enterprises that we are seeing in the Avishkar pipeline for impact investment. But I totally can imagine that becoming an outcome and a major role that we are playing, a few years from now. So right now where we are is we're kind of readying the ecosystem and creating that ecosystem because we are seeing this interest coming in. So to give you another example, we had a Lakme Fashion Week earlier this year. We had this event called Changemakers Showcase, where we essentially picked 6 small enterprises that we think are ripe for investment and need to be scaled, and solutions that can be matched with these larger organizations. And they did a showcase at Fashion Week in front of a panel of potential investors, from Asha Impact, from H&M Collab. So there are sort of little initiatives that we are starting just as a way to get that ecosystem going, to prepare the market, to show investors exactly what's happening in the space. And I think a year or 2 years down the line, that is going to become a very important role for us. So the short answer is yes, and that's amazing.
That's exciting to know that that you were able to put together an event like that around Fashion Week and to pitch to investors, I think that's a fantastic signal to the market that that this is a very exciting new field. But to kind of the entrepreneurs, I don't know how the journey has been. I'm sure there have been many challenges, but Hitesh, let me start with you. How have you raised funding externally, and how, or have you tried to, and how has that experience been? I will talk to Sam in a little bit because the Philippines startup ecosystem is very nascent compared to the India market. So we'll come to you, Sam. But Hitesh, maybe let's hear from you first on what your experience has been in raising capital.
So we knew that unless we are not sure of our business model, which took almost 2 to 3 years to kind of get that confidence in us that we could create some value there, we wouldn't be looking outside for funding. Till date, we haven't taken funding, and we have grown bootstrap 100% year on year the past 4 years now, 4.5 years. And now we have come at a time when we know that what we are doing is right, and we can scale this model up. And now we are actually looking for funding, but it's been like a very nascent kind of an activity that we still haven't got that kind of a time to do that full time, because everybody knows how fundraising is as an activity. But overall, I think the ecosystem really is appreciating of what we are doing. One of the biggest challenges that I've seen, especially in the space that we are in, is the challenge of scale. So what happens is people want you to become very large enterprises, and that's how an investment would kind of become ripe for the other person, right? And that is what I think now we've been proving, that if I can do 70 with 70 artists, I can do so much wonders. There are 20,000 plus families that are kind of required to be taken care of, and if we somehow tap into them, we can build a revenue of 1,000 crores with just 20,000 families. You know what I mean? So that's the kind of models now people are seeing, that how can you make these smaller ecosystems scalable, which was the biggest challenge the ecosystem was facing, and also any external brand was facing. For example, today, if a big brand like Fab India wants to source 10,000 pairs from this ecosystem, they just cannot, because still the ecosystem makes 50 pairs, every household is making, everybody is doing their own thing, they're working in silos. So we needed a model that Desi Angkor has created, which can loop in all of these smaller households and make a scalable model with a standard output. And I think once we prove that, investments will follow in, because at the end it's an input versus output that we've shown.
Yeah, that's exciting. I mean, that's really great to hear, because you also kind of want to raise an investment or the right type of capital at the right time. And if you've demonstrated that you are able to build something scalable, I think then you as an entrepreneur is also in a better position, to ask for that investment and negotiate, I would say, with the investors. So I think that's a great and quite a brave call, I would say, from to be able to bootstrap all the way to where you are today. I think that's really commendable. So congratulations to you guys. But to give you, Tanushree, Hitesh, a little bit of a perspective on the Philippine ecosystem. When I moved from India to here, I had to unlearn a lot of things because I took a lot of things for granted. Where when I was in India, I was complaining, oh, we need to find more quality entrepreneurs, we need more this type of capital, that type of capital. And then I moved to Southeast Asia and the Philippines, and the ecosystem is so nascent that there really is not enough support yet for entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs who are employing kind of market-based models is a very new breed of entrepreneurs. So Sam is one of the few, who are really applying market-based models to solve these social problems. So it's really the very first wave, or at least just the second wave of entrepreneurs. So it's a very different kind of market scenario where, angels are a very new concept. There isn't much angel investing. There aren't many funds yet. Early stage funding, the missing middle is still a big gap. So and then, you kind of layer it with something like a fashion startup. I'm sure, it comes with even more challenges. So Sam, I know you're still in your kind of early days, but have you thought about fundraising, or are you kind of, following kind of the Hitesh way and bootstrapping along for now?
Okay, so sorry, it's raining here like really hard. I don't know if you can hear it.
We
Okay,
can hear you.
so we actually bootstrapped everything with like about $1,000, and it's only been about less than 2 years, so a little less than that, and things are going good, like we're profitable and everything, but really we still have to prove, like similar to Hitesh, we have to prove to investors, if ever we would take up any investors in the future, that there is already a market for it in the Philippines, or that the market is ready for sustainable fashion. Because right now, I don't think a large, or like even not even large, like even a majority, like a minor majority, not even that, is ready for for like sustainable fashion. It's really a baby concept. Like when I was starting out 2 years ago, people were just like, what's that? Like, people know about social enterprises in the Philippines because um, I guess we're all aware of the problems that our countrymen are facing, like poverty, but it's seen as more of like statement purchases. Like, oh, I'll buy this because it's helping out people, but not really a lifestyle thing. So really, there's a lot of mindset changes that people have to go through. But again, like, I really hope that there are more entrepreneurs that go into it. Like when people tell me that, aren't you worried about all of the new brands popping up, I'm like, no, this is great. Or like when Uniqlo starts putting out like shirts made of recycled plastics, but all right, like, that's fine, because the more resources that go into educating the market about sustainable fashion, the better for all of us.
Yeah, that's a great point, because education of the customer is a big part of it, right? Of course, Sam, as you mentioned, the younger generation, millennials, have or even younger, have really been at the forefront of the sustainability movement and being part of climate action. But there is still a majority of the customer base that can pay, that still needs to be converted, I guess. Tanushree, can you tell us a little bit about, are you doing any sort of advocacy of educating the market from kind of the perspective that you're seeing? How do we get more customers for amazing entrepreneurs like Hitesh and Sam?
I think exactly as Sam said, we need more entrepreneurs. Customers need to see a lot of noise happening on this side. And that is something that, I mean, that's a shift that Hitesh probably can speak better to, but I can see that, anecdotally around me, that because there are so many brands like Candid, like Desi Hangover, it's creating a lot of noise, and customers are becoming aware that, okay, there's this whole other alternative, landscape to fashion and accessories that I wasn't aware of. And even if it's just out of curiosity, they're being drawn to it. And especially like the urban city Indian consumer, like the price point doesn't matter. They are spending a lot of money on a lot of clothes and fashion, so that is hardly the barrier. It's just that they don't know and they don't care. From our side, the customer side advocacy is more in terms of our communications, and this is why I want that comms person, because what we are really doing, as I said, is we're focusing on building the industry platform, and we're focusing on getting the ecosystem ready. As we're able to do this, that will hopefully have a sort of natural knock-on effect on the consumer as well, because these enterprises are growing and putting out more of these solutions. If they're scaling, they're becoming more affordable, and so hopefully that works. But essentially on the communication side, we've created this online platform called circularparent.co, which is essentially a platform for the industry, to kind of all of the circular professionals of India to be on board. And then later we're going to open out to affiliate partners, so whether it's students from design colleges, whether it's research institutions, and so we're really kind of broadening the base of who our partners are, and then right now just bringing them online on the platform through knowledge pieces, newsletters, just putting out a lot of communication, just to kind of get them ready. But I think if we can do our job of enabling the entrepreneurs and helping them scale and make the right partnerships, that will happen on its own. The entrepreneurs will take care of that.
That's true. That's so true. I like to also touch on another thing, I think, which all three of you kind of mentioned. Tanushree, you spoke about it when you were talking about your own social enterprise, and I think Hitesh, you spoke about brands like Fab India, coming to you and sourcing. And Sam, you spoke about, manufacturing for other brands. So how important is it, and maybe Tanushree, I'll go back to you for a second, is that, as an industry body, how important is it for us to bring on larger brands? Of course, we are seeing a lot of movement. We're seeing H&M Conscious, we're seeing kind of recycled clothes from Uniqlo, even from the luxury designers. I was recently, in Milan for a friend's wedding, and everywhere I went, all of the big Italian fashion houses, sustainable, they had boards around sustainability and things. I only looked from outside, but it definitely seemed like it's taken hold across the industry. So how important is it, for this change to kind of encompass everybody from kind of small enterprises to the larger industry? And is that kind of the patterns that we're seeing, or is it just a little bit of washing of this because now a circular economy is new? And trying not to
of
be
course.
but
Look, of course it's washing. Of course there's a lot of greenwashing. Let's accept that.
yeah.
But I have to say that even if it's just even if it's just being spent on their marketing budget, if the big brands are talking about this stuff, they are the ones with the loudest voice right now. And so it's a good thing. What is important from so I think they're doing their job. And I happen to know, so when I was on the entrepreneur side, I was extremely skeptical of these larger organizations. But now the last couple of months, I've sort of worked with a lot of them, and I can see that a lot of effort is going into really thinking about sustainability. Now, in many cases, that effort is going in because the consumers are demanding sustainable messages and sustainable, clothing and products. And so it's not necessarily the companies being super conscious, it's that the demand is coming from the consumer side. And so they're responding to it, which is also fine, maybe not the best reason in the world, but at least it's happening. So very important for them to come on board. They're the guys with the loud voices. They're the guys with the big money, and if they don't want to invest on these solutions, we have a huge ecosystem of entrepreneurs here who are developing these solutions and ideas and products for you. And we're happy to kind of bring them into the pipeline.
Yeah, absolutely. Earlier last year, Aditi and I had an opportunity to visit a factory that produces, goods for IKEA. And we were very positively surprised about kind of the stringent policies around zero waste. So, no waste in water, no waste in textiles. They were also, similar to what you were doing, making products out of, the additional textiles. It was a really exceptional factory that we visited. And they took sustainability very seriously because they were doing water, they were doing water conservation, a lot of that. So it definitely seems to have taken hold across the industry. Hitesh, in kind of your engagement with other brands, people trying to source from you, so are you seeing the same trends that Tanushree spoke of?
Yes, definitely. I think as Tanushree said, the other bigger voices. But on the other side of the story, that even if they're marketing, it might be a marketing gimmick or whatever that positioning would be. But they're becoming more aware from what they're sourcing or what their suppliers for. At least they're pushing that that message down into their value chain and making sure that everybody is doing their part because they're facing pressure. And I think that's a good pressure, and because of that, the entire value chain is becoming aware of these practices. And I think that is what will actually help the world, as people call it, or impact the world. I think that's the impact that everybody will start having and contributing because of the pressure which the big guys are getting.
Yeah, absolutely. Sam, we are seeing some of that actively on the high street brands here in the Philippines as well. Some of the brands that you're working with who are coming to you for manufacturing, is that the case with them? Why are they kind of getting into more sustainable fashion? What are you seeing on the ground?
Well, a lot of the people that come to us are interested in like social entrepreneurship. So they're like smaller brands that want to start their own business, but they want it to be more conscious. But also, we're seeing an increase in the amount of interest around it. And I think it is because a lot of the bigger brands are starting to talk about it. But consumers and both consumers and the people wanting to start their own businesses are looking at these brands and trying to figure out whether it is greenwashing or not. So at least there's this mindfulness among consumers and other people about whether the brands are authentic about what they're pushing. And so they're trying to build, although smaller brands, they're trying to build more like authentic, sustainable and ethical brands, like more conscious about what they're doing, and not just the greenwashing thing. But greenwashing is super helpful. I mean, like, if ever they do get into it, like for real, like seriously, um, going into sustainable fashion, that would be great, because it would set the standard for everybody else. Like all of the players that want to go in have to be authentic as well, you know? And I think that would make a really big difference across the industry. When people approach our garment workers, they're gonna have to think of that standard that's already been set for them. So yeah.
Yeah, great. So greenwashing is a great start, and we hope it opens the doors, to more serious, conscious and ethical fashion. So that's great. That's great to hear. All of you are calling that. What about, maybe, as we get into our last comments, the other big stakeholder, government. Does government play a role at all? And what should that role be? Tanushree, I'm sure, you guys are discussing this quite a bit. And what do you see as the role of government? Is there a role at all in this large, privately driven industry?
I mean, 100% yes. What we are doing on our side is we are actually working on creating like a policy innovation lab, where we are working with a bunch of different stakeholders and members of the industry, but primarily anchored by CRB at the moment, so Center for Responsible Business. And we're kind of supporting them in creating this model where we can answer the question that you just asked me, that what needs to be done at a policy level. So, I mean, I think we all come in and say, yes, of course, imagine if there was a policy, the way they've banned plastic, that was amazingly effective. If there is a policy that I have to pay every single worker minimum wage, that would transform millions of lives, So of course, policy is like where it finally ends at. That's the last call, because organizations can be extremely conscious because of consumer demand, but then ultimately if there's nobody watching over them and they don't have to do it, a lot of them won't. So that's the final milestone, and that's something that we are definitely very conscious of. But we're not going in by answering, assuming any answers. We're just going in by saying, okay, let's start assessing and talking to everybody, and then hopefully arriving at a draft that the industry as a whole sort of agrees upon.
Absolutely. Hitesh, just kind of same question to you. You've been doing this for a while, and a lot of it is driven by young people like yourself who got into this. And what do you think is the role that government could play to improve the lives of these communities, right? Because that is definitely a key part of poverty eradication, and that's really why you're doing what you're doing.
I think the role of government is very important, but the problem is that they're not effective as a body, because you're really talking about understanding in a very different context, especially when we are solving a problem for the community. There are problems of social problems, there are cultural problems, and then there comes a business problem. So first we have to, our model, for example, there is casteism involved. People are like, the women that work in a particular area won't go to the others because they belong to some other caste. And there are a lot of these other challenges which that ecosystem has. It's not just that a supply chain issue and raw material issue. We have to build a model wherein we make an account every aspect of the people who are involved in this trade, and then build a business model around it. And I think the government's role would be good enough if they allow people like us to function properly. I think that would be a bare minimum, and I think that is also a good enough thing that they would do, and not meddle with people good. So I feel that they should not really get into it because that's not their expertise, but they should really build and support ecosystems is what my personal take is.
Yeah, absolutely. So enable the ecosystem and enable the market so that the players can actually do the job and address some of these issues. Okay,
Can I say one thing here?
Of course.
Sure.
I've had like a lot of drastic changes in my mindset and in my learning this year. It's been like a heavy year for me. So before I joined CIF, I worked for 3 months with the UNDP, on a rural craft project along with the Maharashtra State Rural Livelihoods Mission. It was my very, very first time being in contact with the government and seeing them work. And I was fortunate enough to kind of do a bunch of tours in villages around Maharashtra. And that impression of, oh my God, Indian government was definitely there. And I would say at a state level, you're not wrong. It is like that. But when you go down to like the district and the local level, the government officials and the employees that I met were fabulous people who were really doing it for the right reasons, because they are people who are born and brought up in those villages and regions, understand it culturally completely, and joining the government is like their way of really making impact. And so at that level, when you engage, I found that mind blowing. So really had my mind completely changed on that front. Just my
I would agree to her with that point.
Yeah, that's a great
No,
point,
definitely.
right? What levels of government should we really engage with to create that last mile impact? Sam, I think we have similar views about, how government works on some of these policy issues here in the Philippines. But have you seen, any positive signs around these issues from the government? Maybe if not at the, central level, but maybe at least from the local government unit.
Okay, so actually, okay, so government, right? Don't we just love talking about them? So, government in the Philippines, I mean, there's a lot of facets, I guess, that they have to look at, right? As a developing country, um, yeah, they have to find that balance between economic growth. Like if, for example, they raise minimum wage for all the workers, we might lose some of our export clients. So I kind of understand why the policies aren't there yet, but I do see movement in the local government because, especially in our area, we're kind of called like the garments capital of the Philippines, and so I talked to our mayor actually recently, and he said that I explained to him that a lot of the workers aren't don't know how to create quality clothes because they only know how to make the really cheap ones, and that I wanted to provide them with the opportunity to learn properly the technical skills needed to create quality and that we could export at a higher value. Uh, so they are open to a partnership for creating a TESDA school. TESDA here is like a government sanctioned training for vocational skills like garments making. So we're actually thinking of putting up a garment school here in Rizal, and the government is putting up half of the funding, and I'm looking for the other half. So
Very interesting. That's great news. Congratulations for pulling that off. Because I think having that backing, especially at the local level, I think definitely transforms the area. So good luck, and let's see how we can connect you to more people to get to that funding. That's really exciting news. As we're kind of getting close to the end of our discussion here, thank you so much for all the fascinating and very, very interesting discussion today. But I'd like to come to you maybe for some final thoughts. If the industry is still fairly nascent, but there are so many of you that have been working to change the space, to bring this mindset to really enforce conscious consumerism, and really be a part of circular economy as as ever more so important today. So if you were to have a magic wand, what would be the one thing that is really urgently needed in this industry or in your business, that really needs to get implemented right away? Hitesh, I'll start with you. I feel like you've thought about this before.
Not
But if there was
really.
one thing that you think needs change or you would love to see happen, what would it be?
For me, I mean, my personal goal is that 20,000 artisans are living above minimum wage, and doubling their income is what my immediate thought that comes to my mind. But apart from that, on the larger spectrum, from a world's perspective, I believe that it's time when people understand what they do, and every action has a reaction somewhere, maybe not immediate. And they really need to be conscious of that reaction which they leave behind. And I think even if they are aware of that, and I think we would be much better off.
All right. Sam, same question to you. Magic wand, what would you want to see?
Okay, I definitely did not think of this question before.
Surprise,
uh,
surprise.
but I think for me, it would definitely be market education, just because like the market in the Philippines is so, not yet educated about it. And I think that the demand would be enough to drive changes in the business and government level, to like the pressure from the people. Yeah.
So more conscious customers,
Yeah.
make that happen overnight. That would be wonderful. Tanushree, what would your wish be?
Oh, wow. Okay, so right now we're working a lot with organizations' questions about packaging waste. We have a great ecosystem with e-commerce and with stores and everything, and the clothes are sustainable, but the packaging is still not, and is becoming its own thing. So I guess right now my magic wand ideally would solve the problem of plastic and packaging waste for the apparel industry, so that we can focus on the apparel.
Yeah.
And like that's a big enough problem, but we're on that right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. Wonderful. I really wish I could give you that magic wand, but I'm sure each of you are warriors fighting to get to this magical situation. I want to thank you so much for being part of our discussion here today. Each of your perspective and insights really have been so valuable, and I can hear and feel the passion that you have, to change this industry. And I wish you all the very best. And I, really, from Philippines to India, for everything in between, this is the developing market. We are, on the upwards of consumerism. We are excited by our open markets and access to goods, but we also have a young population, and we have a conscious population. And let's hope, you are successful in your endeavors, and as a group we are able to make these changes. So thank you again, and have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thanks
Thanks
a
so
lot.
much.
Thank you.
All right, and that's it for this time's panel. We hope to see you next time. Do join us, and have a good evening.